Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dr. Judy WTF, What the Freud. And we're kind of continuing on the theme of narcissism. Last week, I talked about covert narcissism. And this week, I'm talking about overt narcissism, which is much more overt, much more recognizable. And I want to start by saying that for those of you who might secretly think, oh my God, I am a narcissist or have these traits, please listen, because this conversation will not only be about the people that have been hurt by that kind of behavior, but also peeling back the onion and seeing how people who suffer from narcissistic personality disorder have developed this disorder. And for those of you who are dyed-in-the-wool narcissists, there is help. Most people with this disorder don't want help because it's too painful to, as I say, peel back the onion, go back to the cause, and identify very, very painful childhood wounds and then reprocess those feelings. So from my point of view, narcissism, as many of you have heard me say, is a system gone wrong. And this system gone wrong starts with the parent-infant connection or disconnection, if you will. And this parent-infant, starting with mother-infant and father-infant connection, which is supposed to be the foundation of a child's core sense of self, gets disrupted because either the parent is preoccupied with themselves, maybe they are deceased or not emotionally available. It's possible that they themselves lack empathy and are unable to give it and mirror and attune to the child, the process of which is so important for the formation of a healthy core of self. So let me back up for a minute and say that when a child is born, they don't really have a sense of self, and they look into the eyes of their caregiver, primarily mother, usually mother, to self-define. And if mother is smiling back at them, if mother is attuned to their needs, if mother's able to intuit why the baby's crying, why her baby's crying, and attend to those needs, the baby feels contained. And this kind of containment allows the baby to relax their body and soak in these psychological nutrients of mirroring and attunement and and touch and eye gazing and breastfeeding and all the things that are necessary to form a healthy human psyche. And if lucky enough, there is a secondary parent, usually father, around to nurture the mother so that she is supported and she can trickle down her emotional goodies to her child. And so I'm going to describe how the system goes wrong. I'm going to also talk about Heinz Kohut, an object relations psychologist who talks about narcissism, how it is formed, and a couple of other articles in here. And remember, this is a call-in show, so please feel free to call in, 323-524-2599. So I want to read a little bit about Childhood Roots of Narcissistic Personality Disorder by Brian Johnson and Lori Burdahi, MD. Okay, so in this article, they talk about that NPD is more common in men. I can't know of any research projects that have actually proved this to be so, but the body of research shows that it's more prevalent in men, and that as opposed to self-centeredness that should be gradually declining as children get older, the child needs to develop healthily, and when they don't have the self-esteem which is given to them by the parent, somehow they have to make up for this, and so they cannot let go of the self-centeredness because they don't have enough attention paid to the self. So when this happens, the healthy levels of self-esteem start to drop, and the narcissism starts to rise, which is a defense against feeling unworthy and unimportant, and really feeling underneath an extreme low sense of self-esteem, which will then bring anxiety if exposed, or depression. And instead of allowing for that, the person will huff and puff and aggrandize themselves, and then slip back into devaluing themselves, and then they'll do all kinds of things to manage their emotions around this. So if you or anybody that you know have experienced narcissistic injury, if you've been raised by parents who lack empathy, if you've been raised by parents who control and manipulate, or parents who praise you without any real cause for earned praise and spoil you, then they're really setting you up for a very, very bad fall. Because when you come into the world, you can't just expect to get from people. You have to earn from people. And if you're not taught to earn in your family system, then you'll walk into the world entitled, and people might just chop you down. So this is a call-in show, everyone. 323-524-2599. I would love to hear from you and your experiences with having been raised by a narcissist, or maybe even daring enough to to call in and talk about your narcissistic tendencies, which we all have some of those. So just a little bit more from this article. Besides showing lack of empathy, narcissists filter information and react on the basis of the effect on their egos. So if they're not being stroked, they will lash out. And if they're being stroked, then they will soak that in and put themselves up higher on the pedestal and expect more and more and more. And that launches a really bad system, because then you're supposed to keep feeding the endless cycle of need of aggrandization, which is impossible, because that's what I refer to as the hole in the soul. So I want to refer back to the mind map for a moment, and let's go to panel number 1, which is the wounds of childhood. And a little bit different in the case of overt narcissism. Covert narcissism has a different way of expression, because the covert narcissist has to go under the radar, and they do that by usually becoming passive aggressive and keeping their cards close to their vest and surprise attacking you, and also fooling you into thinking they are the loveliest people in the world. Whereby with the overt narcissist, you kind of know what's coming, because they're flashier. They drive flashy cars. They might wear flashy wardrobes. They might have flashy-looking homes. They might talk about how great they are. They might put people down in public. And I shouldn't say might, they usually do. And so they're much more easy to recognize, and in a sense, they're upfront obnoxious. However, again, I do want to speak to the people who do suffer from this. It is a defense mechanism. It's a defense mechanism against being abused, neglected, a defense mechanism against being overspoiled and not earning, and then defending against people who will not give them a free ride like their parents did. So there are a lot of ways that one can mess up a human being, and it could be on one end of the spectrum, too much given to them without them earning it, all the way to neglecting your child, not being there for them. So I want to go over back to the mind map and look at these 5 childhood wounds, which I think as a human race we all suffer from at least some of them. And those 5 are physical abuse, emotional, verbal abuse, neglect, spoiling, smothering, and the last one is I don't know which one I didn't leave out. Okay, so physical, verbal, sexual abuse. So these are forms of shadowing over the core sense of self. And if the light in panel 1 represents the authentic, emerging, I call it the big I in my book, Be the Cause Healing Human Disconnect, which you are all privy to have a free copy of. See, the big I will not develop because these shadows and limitations imposed on the child arrest them in their development, so that there's always a kind of a point of stuckedness, and people wonder, how come they're acting so immature? How come they're lagging behind in their cognitive skills? How come they have inappropriate social skills? This is why, because these shadows limit the child's growth. And if you go over to the reactions of to the wounds, which is panel 2, then you could see that with narcissistic injury, which is all predicated on human disconnect, when a baby is disconnected from, if they're not attended to, if they're not mirrored and attuned to, they will either fight, or they'll flee, or they'll freeze, or as one patient said to me today, another term I did not know about, they will fawn, which is kind of like a possum playing dead. And Martin Seligman talks about learned helplessness, and when a child who is in a hostage situation feels that they don't have any power, they are not causal in their world, then they don't have a choice but to take it. And since there's nothing that they can do about it, oftentimes they will just start shutting down and disconnecting. And from the mind map point of view, narcissistic defenses are a result of some level of apathy. And when you've been treated apathetically, you yourself have a high risk of not possessing any empathy. And that's a problem. It's a problem because as you grow older and you get involved in relationships, you can't always fake it. It's not possible to fool everyone. And pretty soon people really figure out that you're just in it for yourself and that you don't really care and you're not really listening. You're just kind of going through the motions of saying, uh-huh, and shaking your head and making nice, but there's no connection. And people who are developing and aware and have empathy will pretty soon notice that there's this kind of a lack of luster in the way they treat you, and you start feeling objectified, start feeling like maybe you're only in their world to entertain them or compliment them or make them feel special and important, which brings me to one of the features of narcissism, especially overt narcissism, is they like to surround themselves with very, very important people. And if they can name drop and paint a picture of how important they are and be liked by thousands and hundreds of thousands of followers on Facebook, well, that just gives them a little bit of a spurt of adrenaline or dopamine, and it's addictive. So yes, then that low self-esteem will be fed by the fuels of these compliments and gratification types of comments or behaviors. And again, why is this so? Because they don't feel very good inside at all. So in their panel 2, they're really actually suffering from a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of a feeling of deadness and worthlessness, because again, in order to form a healthy human psyche, you've got to be able to look into your parents' eyes and self-define. So again, I'd like to hear from you. The call-in number, again, is 323-524-2599. So here are some ways that that narcissistic personality is developed. Bullying. Well, bullying, I don't think in and of itself is going to develop an NPD. I think what will develop an NPD is a person who's being bullied and not defended by their parents. Because I've heard a lot of cases in my treatment room where people will say, I was really, really bullied, and my parents told me, don't worry about it, go back in the ring and stand up for yourself. And this is just not going to give that child a feeling of being stuck up for. So it's not so much just the bullying from others that will destroy this person's sense of self-esteem. It's that the parents, by active omission, will do nothing to step in and do something about the situation. Another point brought up is the need to win, no matter who is hurt. Well, why would there be a need to win, no matter who is hurt, unless you're raised by parents who need to win, no matter how much the child is hurt? So this didn't come from nowhere. So again, we've got to go back to the cause and see where children are picking up these needs to hurt and these needs to win, no matter what. Persistent lying to benefit oneself will lie about lying, turns lies into someone else's fault. They deflect accountability by attacking messengers who point out lies. Well, this is again sourced back to a family system where this is modeled, but more than just being modeled, the child who does such a thing, lying, feels unsafe in his world or her world, unsafe to tell the truth, because if they do tell the truth, perhaps the parent will mock them or criticize them or shoot them down, or even worse, not even respond to them. And so they will become voiceless over time. Here's another one. Egotistical view of extraordinary self-worth. Well, what do you think this is in response to? Again, panel 5. Let's just jump to panel 5 for a minute. The narcissistic defense. So when you're feeling worthless and you're feeling ashamed and you're feeling like you don't matter and you're feeling scared to be found out that you're not all that, you will puff up and you will pump yourself up and make yourself look as if you're worth a lot. Why? Because you don't think you are, and you're afraid that other people will find out that you're not. So can you connect the dots and see that this is all a reaction formation to being critically hurt by our caregivers? Preoccupation with getting one's own needs met over other people's. Well, they just don't know how to play the game of life because it wasn't about them at the beginning of life, as it should have been, because at the beginning of life, parents are supposed to attend to the child's needs, not vice versa. So when the child's needs are not attended to by the parents, then the system goes into reverse and they start thinking about their own needs over other people's. So they're never taught reciprocity. They're never taught that that they're better off with a system of getting their needs met and giving other people also emotional supplies. That is just not something in the repertoire. And as I say many times in my book, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect, which again you can all get a free PDF copy of. Just write me, ask me, download it from my website, drjudywtf.com or psychologicalhealingcenter.com. And you can read about how parents set the bar. And parents set the bar because the family defines what is normal and what is not. For example, in loud families where people are fighting and drinking and making a lot of chaos, that's the norm. In families where children are being hit and the cousins are also hitting their kids and the neighbors are also hitting their kids, well, that's normal too. But you could see that just because it's normal in the family or the culture, it doesn't make it psychologically healthy at all. Another reaction here is aggressive responses to be criticized, wronged, or upset. Well, of course, there's no tolerance for criticism because they never built a healthy sense of self. They never built up healthy defense mechanisms. And instead of parents giving them straight up feedback and helping them self-correct and self-reflect, this is where the chopping away at their self-esteem creates a system of aggressive responses to be criticized, wronged, or upset. And here's another one, entitled attitudes, which leads to acting as if they deserve special treatment to get whatever they want, no matter what the circumstances. Have you ever been to a restaurant with somebody with narcissistic tendencies? Well, it's not fun. I have. And they're ordering the waiters around. They barely tip people, if at all. The food is either too hot or too cold, or they're sending things back, or put the heater up, put the heater down. And I'm not talking about extreme cases where it's really hot or really cold, or you're wanting to be assertive, but this is just a constant way of treating people and the demeaning and the devaluing. If the food doesn't come on time, watch out. And so this is the flavor of red flags to watch out for. And if you actually behave that way, then think about it not from the point of view of you're such a bad person, which of course everybody sees you as, and maybe you've earned that title, but from the point of view of, do I really want this for myself? Is this who I want to be being in life? And once we can unravel the cause behind it, then maybe we can soften up your heart and bring back the flow of connection. And rather than using people, have a new relationship with people of interconnection and experiencing each other on an empathic level. So I'm actually inviting people who exhibit these characteristics to give yourselves the chance, because ultimately people who suffer from this don't go into treatment. They usually avoid the treatment. They'll come if their wives or husbands are about to divorce them, but not so much on their own. So I'm saying you can have an opportunity. There's so much information out there, and stop blaming yourselves and take responsibility and see if maybe going deeper on this and not acting out so much can, in the long run, bring you a lot more joy and peace of mind and ability to sustain relationships, and just the ability to really build your self-esteem, not at the expense of others, because that never builds self-esteem. So again, this is a call-in show, everybody, and I would love to hear from you. 323-524-2599. And I see a lot of this in my office. I think I spend most of my days dealing with people who whose parents have mistreated them, or who have not given them the empathy that they crave. And as a result, I hear core beliefs like, I'm not lovable, I am incompetent, I don't matter, I shouldn't have been born. These are some of the core beliefs that result when our parents don't give us the nurturance, don't give us the attention, don't give us the boundaries, don't give us the ability to self-regulate our emotions, because we have to be taught that. And if that's all missing, well, what do you expect a child will do in reaction to that? So going back to panel 5, these are all defense mechanisms. It's not the way it was supposed to be for anybody. But when you're injured and injured and injured, you will develop a calloused heart. And I think we have a call-in. Hello, you are on the couch. And what is your name, please?
Charlene.
Hi, Charlene. Welcome to the show. And where are you calling from? What part of the world are you calling from?
I actually called a few weeks ago. I'm calling from Oceanside.
Okay, thanks for calling again.
Diego.
Yeah, okay. So tell me what inspired you to call tonight.
Oh, well, I can so relate.
Oh, okay.
So
I'm sorry to hear
my
that.
My whole life I've had, my whole life I've had a really bad, family dysfunction and bad relationship with my mom off and on. And
okay.
A lot of times staying on because of pressure from, their family members or friends, you got to have a relationship with your mom, And in 2016, my sister passed away from alcoholism.
Wow. Okay.
And then 3 weeks later, my brother was killed on his motorcycle.
Oh my God! Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's still a lot to process. And it was somebody's mistake. They made a U-turn in front of him, and he died instantly. And, I was telling my mom, we should get a lawyer. And she was adamant about not getting a lawyer, and she trusted that the DA was going to handle everything. And I really felt like that wasn't the case. And just that I had my own opinion, she cut me off.
Okay.
And I couldn't believe that after everything that we just went through, losing my sister and my brother, that she was able to cut off now her only surviving daughter.
Well,
and I thought, there's got to be something to this. And I started Googling. I felt like I had to get that answer. I started Googling dynamics between a mother and their children. And I came across some information about narcissistic personality disorder.
Yeah.
And wouldn't you know it, she hit every bullet point.
Yeah.
And it really dawned on me, and it's just been really opening. And then, I started looking at different YouTubes and came across yours, and really yours has really just hit home with me, because you start seeing that encoding that you talk about.
Yes, very much so.
And I think that's the healing process, though. You really see the encoding, and I catch myself, realizing, okay, that's the blueprint that my mom has made.
That's right. That's right. That's not you as defined by you. That's you as interpreting who you are through your mother's eyes. And that's a really, really dangerous place to be in, because if they're cold, unempathic eyes, then you're staring into them and you're looking in the mirror of who you are, and you conclude, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, I shouldn't have even been born. Okay, and whether they say it or not, sometimes they do, and sometimes they just treat you as if. It doesn't matter. You're still encoding those messages. So you're right. The first step is recognizing the cause, recognizing the reactions to it, and then seeing what you encoded there, because these encodings are lies. They're not based on any universal truth that you are indeed worthless, or you should have been an abortion, or something that you heard from your parents.
Gosh,
yeah,
right?
I've heard that a lot in my practice.
You just hit that. When I was like 10, she told me, she had 5 children. Her second son, my brother, passed away when he was a year and a half from congenital heart failure. We've had a lot of loss in the family. And, when I was like 10, she was always talking about, my brother that passed, and my parents never dealt with it. And she said, and then when I got pregnant with you, well, it just wasn't a thing in the 60s. I was born in 71. It just wasn't, talked about. But, I thought about aborting you. I thought about abortion.
That's a little bit of a TMI, don't you think? That's not something that should be landing in a child's ears. That's unerasable. Unerasable.
It is.
Except through therapy.
It's forever.
Except through therapy. I'll take it back. It's erasable. The impact of it is erasable, because once you identify how crazy that is for a parent to say such a thing to the child, you then become indignant. And I believe that a pathway to healing is when you put that boundary up and you become indignant and you say to yourself or your parent, but really don't say it to your parent, because no good thing will come of it. Listen to my episode on the herder can't be the healer. They're never going to come around.
Yes, I have.
Okay, yeah, that one.
Yeah.
So you have to develop this sense of indignity, internal indignity, where you're saying, how dare you say that to me? What is wrong with you? Because that helps to clarify the boundary between who you are and what they're doing to you. And that's where where they stop and you start. Right.
Yep. Yeah, it's definitely recognizing that stuff and realizing more than like, well, that's kind of odd. That's weird. It's really digging deeper into that. And when you did the show last week about the covert narcissist, I saw still a lot of that in my mom.
Yes.
That she could be covert, mostly overt. She's definitely mostly overt, but there's covert, in her. And my dad, if I look at my dad, he never stood up for us. He covertly was thinking about himself all the time, didn't want to rock the boat ever with her. So, by keeping that peace with her and satisfying his own things, I can see that as being narcissistic.
Can you see the difference that your mother, being the overt, was more, I guess the word might be out there, exaggerated, aggrandizing herself, and your father may have been more passive, maybe more passive-aggressive, quieter, more shy, unassertive, yes?
Yep.
And that's the difference. However, the in common part is that they still do not display empathy. There's a lack of empathy, and that's the problem. And so, when you said, "Oh yeah, my mother hit every point," do you mind sharing what those points are so people can recognize this in their own family or even in themselves? So what did you see that you went, wow, look at this, look at that? What did you hear or see?
Right. If I can't remember the exact bulleted list, but I will tell you, from what I remember as far as what they were listing off, like you're saying, no, not having the ability to empathize, like the grandiose, like, she would always brag about herself, brag about how great she did this or that.
Yes.
It's, always with the neighbors or the family. Not being able to, I don't think she's ever apologized. I mean, I think one time when I was confronting her on my feelings, I think I was late teens, and she kicked all of us kids out of the house. So because of, we didn't fit her mold. So when I was confronting her on that, it was like, well, I made Halloween costumes for you, and you're just like, okay, that was something that you wanted to do. That wasn't something that was important to me. So lack of being able to, see these things and be able to mirror, oh, that bothers you? I'm so sorry. Just general selfish behavior, verbal abuse. I remember the first time she called me a name. I was 4 years old and a brat. And I remember at 4 going into the bathroom, shutting the door, and just crying my little eyes out, my feet dangling off the toilet. I just sat there and thought about it and thought to myself, but I'm not a brat. Yeah. And that stuck with me for the rest of my life, name calling, yelling. She would ignore, people, the family for 2 weeks. I remember 2 weeks she wouldn't talk to anybody because she was pissed off at my dad.
And there's that passive-aggressive stuff, right?
Yeah.
The silent treatment. And if you look at the outcome of, the outcome of your parents' family, my God, we've got one overdose, a death, correct?
Yes.
And then I don't know what state of mind your poor brother was in when he was killed. Then of course the children are going to be symptomatic. Of course they're going to suffer. Of course they're not going to be able to be as hardy and self-defending in a healthy way as possible, because once you pierce that shell of protection for a child, you go right beyond, right to the core of the ego, just as a easy way to understand it. And then again, those negative core beliefs land in there and they deposit. Right. And they become what I call the psychovirus, because they play over and over again. Just like Freud said, repetition principle. They play over and over again, right. And then they start repeating in patterns in relationships, whether they be friendships or romantic ones or whatever relationships, and then people just spin in this 4, 5, 6 panel, 4, 5, 6 with the Freud over and over, and until they start letting the poison out, and until they identify the cause of it, they're going to get sidetracked into thinking, well, the problem is I have ADD. The problem is that I'm depressed. The problem is that I'm anxious. The problem is, and those are not the problems. Those are the outcomes of the problems.
Yeah.
Okay?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, my sister would say things like that. She felt guilty, and she didn't know why. Mm-hmm. And I always try to just tell her, you're not guilty of anything. You haven't done anything. You've been a great daughter. You're a great person. You have nothing to feel guilty about. Yeah. She's like, I know, but I just don't know why. And that's why she drank. I mean, she drank because she felt guilty and she didn't know why.
And there's the hole in the soul, and the drugs or the alcohol are supposed to quell that feeling, and it's it doesn't work because it doesn't really defend. It ends up killing, and in your sister's case, it took her life. So I want to continue on and read a little bit about Kohout. Let's see if I have an article. So just you could stay on and see if any of this resonates. Value character traits like honesty and kindness were not really taught in the household. That entitled attitudes were modeled, and feelings were squelched, and false blame was placed on the children, which is why your sister felt so guilty. So does that all resonate with you as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Have you been reading the book? Do you have a copy of my book?
I do have a copy of your PDF, and like I was telling you before, I just work a lot, and then I get home and I will read, and it makes me tired, and I fall asleep, and then, I have to read this while I have ADD, so it's shocking, and it takes me about 3 or 4 times to go over one page for it to sink in.
Yeah, it's just
so it's really hard for me to read. It's challenging, so I have to really be alert and aware. But I was saying before, too, I would love to get like the video series, too, and I think that, the work is really good, and I'm looking forward to, that's why I watch your videos every week, because it's like, it's not reading, but it's a way for me to
listen,
relate and still dig deep, and
I just want to lend you another perspective on ADD. I haven't seen any research around it where they have pinned down a biological marker. And again, I give the disclaimer that I'm not a neurobiologist or neuroscience person. After years of experience with this, I find that people who exhibit signs of ADD or ADHD are injured at the causal level. And what happens when your emotions are not regulated, it makes it hard to access your frontal lobe, which is where you do the thinking. So if your amygdala and limbic system are injured, then how can you think straight? How is it possible? It's not possible.
I completely see that. Yeah, and I never, didn't even know it was ADD for a very long time. I struggled in school with reading and focusing, although I was a really good student. I just had a really hard time.
So maybe
but I can see that now with you and going through all this, it is something that, it was trauma from a young age. And,
seriously,
and that's probably where
maybe one great thing that can come out of this conversation for you is just please release this idea of this ADD thing that you have, okay? And start understanding that it is impossible to concentrate when you're thinking that you're worthless or that you're a brat or that you're not good enough or you never should have been born or you should have been an abortion. Right. How do you think straight? Right. So you're not free to think because you're in this mode of defending against all of the what the Freud's running through your head, all of the psychoviruses. So that just usurps the concentration away from your learning and your art and your sports and your joy and your being in the moment. It's impossible to be that because the traumatized brain doesn't live in the here and now. The traumatized brain is still trying to work out who said what back then or who did what back then, or even on an unconscious level, which is referred to as complex PTSD, the time and the era where you didn't even know what happened, still, that stuff is recorded there. It's recorded in your limbic system. It's recorded in your body.
Totally agree with you. I totally see that. I really do.
So maybe when you sit down to read my book, next time you can just say, have a little empathy that it takes me 3 times to read the same thing all over again. And that's because this doctor is talking about childhood trauma, and maybe I'm being a little bit re-traumatized by her words. And so I can't even read her words because I'm being triggered in my limbic system. Okay? And if you talk to yourself that way with empathy and just try to understand yourself, not from the view of, oh, I'm stupid, oh, I can't read, oh, I can't learn. No. It's impossible to learn when you're licking your childhood wounds. It's doesn't work.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
So, when you get through my book, I want to hear from you. I want to hear about your ADD symptoms, okay, after you've done some work around it, all right? And absolutely, but my son,
and it totally goes with what you're saying. My son is ADHD.
Yeah.
And but so I worked really hard on not having the same relationship, and I have succeeded as I had with my mom, right? I wanted to have a family to redo, change what I had lived through.
Okay. So I'm just going to tell you one thing, because I know I have another caller, but I want to leave you with this.
Okay.
The best way to heal our children is to own our own stuff. I even have a video on it. It's quite potent. This video.
Well, I was just going to say that he's ADHD because I believe the stress that I was going through in that time of my marriage when I was pregnant. And, it's what you're saying. It goes back to things that you can't even recall.
Exactly. And if you start taking the pressure off of him, right, and own your own stuff, let's see what happens with him. I want to know.
Absolutely.
All right? Okay, so
sounds good.
Thank you so much for calling in, and I hope that
and thank you so much again, Judy.
There.
Yeah, no, you're awesome.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. It's very sweet.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know if the caller's still there. Do we still have the caller? Oh, awesome. Okay. Thank you so much for your patience. I wanted to finish a couple of thoughts. And yes, you are on the couch. What is your name, please?
Good evening, Dr. Judy. This is Robert.
Hi, Robert.
Call you.
Nice to hear from you, and all your wonderful comments on YouTube, and all your wonderful suggestions for radio shows. I know you want me to do one on Ponzi schemes, which is an example of overt and covert narcissism, because the scheme itself is an underlying, it's a dig under. You don't know it's coming on, and the need to use you. Wow. And to financially betray, which you're familiar with. But tell me, what question did you have about the topic of overt narcissism?
Well, as soon as I heard the topic overt narcissism and it came up, the first person that I thought of, and I haven't thought about her in couple weeks since she texted me, and I deleted her.
Okay.
And it was my mommy dearest.
Your mommy dearest.
Want to do a label that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And I never spoke much about her. I know. I remember I called you last year, and that was before I did the My Map video series. But now I'm more regulated and self-centered.
Yeah.
Centered with the whole concept.
Integrated.
Yes, and less reactive.
Yes.
But I remember saying, I don't want to talk to her, but I never explained why. So maybe I could just explain, and then maybe have a couple questions.
Yeah, go ahead. Sure.
Well, I don't want to maybe put culture out there, but I am Italian, Spanish, Irish, and my household was always very loud. But I always remember there constantly being screaming, fighting, doors slamming, cursing, and I broke away from her because she was never a kind, loving mother. But it was mostly trauma bonds and obligations, whether to visit her, and she didn't even respect me as a person to say. She would call me, Bobby, and I would say, Mom, call me Robert, or my friends call me Rob, and I would get the response, I'll call you whatever the F I want to. And that was just a total lack of respect. And then once I cut ties, I reflect back that once there was a time of sexual abuse that happened to me, and when
from your mother to you, or somebody else?
It was from somebody else, and it actually happened twice in one night. And the first time it happened, I remember thinking I could never tell my mother or even my father.
Yeah.
But then the second time it happened, the person just said, you know, I'm going to complete the act, and it happened. I went to the police and gave my deposition. They had to get my clothes, and as soon as I went into the house,
how old were you? How old were you at this time?
I just turned 14.
Okay.
And it was the summertime, so I just turned 14. I was getting ready to go into high school, and they had to get my clothes for evidence. So my mother was sitting there, and she said, what the bleep did he do? And she said, he didn't do nothing wrong. A crime was committed. He was sexually violated. And I just remember her saying, ew. Well, did the man have a orgasm? She said that very loud, and then she said, well, we just want to get the clothes and do this. And she just kept saying how disgusting she felt that was. And that kind of made my skin crawl more than the actual violation itself was. But then as the years progressed, there was so much insult to injury, and just the coldness of I realized, and I kept thinking about what you said, that we want to label them a parent or a primary caregiver. As the years progress, they kill whatever feelings you have towards them.
That's right.
That's right. And it never was really love. It was more of, if I don't go there, it would be a verbal mud bath. It would be a verbal smear campaign. But now it's like, I don't really care.
That's your progress. First. This is where, you know, as you wrote to me, or I think it was some comment you made either directly to me, I think it was a text that you left me to say that you know, you're just not reacting the same way. It's like you're done. You're feeling pretty done with it. It just doesn't get that same rise out of you anymore.
It doesn't, and she sent me a text, hi, Bob, how are you, smiley face, and I just deleted it. And then she sent a message to a friend of mine, and her message was, I don't know what the hell I ever did to him. So the crazy making is, no matter what, she's never going to own her own stuff. So
never.
I could sit there.
Nope.
Never.
No.
And what's the point of me even getting even reactive a little bit? But here's my question. And I pretty much think I know the answer, but knowing how great your knowledge is, I'm dying to hear. I live with my my best friend, my partner, who's wonderful. However, when it comes to if I hear him watching television, and if there are people screaming in the film, or whether it sounds like there's gunshots in the film, or whether it sounds like everyone's fighting, I feel like I don't get triggered. However, it's almost like turn that off, or I have to put a towel under my door, or put some music on. Is that from my past upbringing of hearing that in my environment constantly, that it almost strikes a chord?
Well, you know, I've been listening to, you have to take continuing education units as a psychologist, and I've been listening to the video by Bessel van der Kolk, Dr. van der Kolk, and he is the author of The Body Keeps the Score, and he was talking about how the trauma lives in the limbic system, and that the key triggers for trauma were sights and sounds and the auditory stuff and the smell, so that people who hear that noise again or smell that smell or they're stimulated that way, they're still those unconscious triggers. So the limbic system is being hit with these stimuli. And it's still reminding you of the pre-verbal stuff and the verbal stuff. Pre-verbal meaning when you were a baby and you couldn't really remember it, and it got stuck in your system anyway. It got stuck in your body. It got stuck in your psyche. So now when you hear it, it still puts you on some sort of an alert that maybe something's not okay, or maybe at the bare minimum, that's a really obnoxious sound. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to be activated that way. So, and I tend to agree with Dr. Vanderkolk that the best treatment for this, he talks a lot about EMDR, and he talks about EMDR more for the post-traumatic stress. And he says it's not very effective for the complex PTSD. What I'm finding to be the best treatment for that is to get back into your body. For me, it's yoga, okay? I used to do a lot of martial arts. I still want to do that again. And for me, it's really being in the now, in my body, because when we're traumatized, we leave our body. We either dissociate, or we're sitting in that what the Freud zone, trigger zone, and so on. So bringing yourself to the here and now, and what does that for people differs. For some, it's meditation. For some, it's yoga. For some, it's doing artwork. For some, it's playing music. Whatever it is that brings you into the moment is going to help most treat your amygdala. Okay? Makes sense? So I know...
It makes perfect sense, and especially what you said, that is more pre than meaning that's annoying. It's obnoxious. Whereas I can't pinpoint. Oh, that reminds me of that time, that date.
It won't, because those sensations are locked in sound memories and smell memories. They're more auditory. Okay, so don't expect to access them. But the fact that you're not having huge reactions, they're mere annoyances, speaks to the work that you've done on yourself, that you're no longer being as triggered by the cause. But it's still an annoyance, okay? It's still an annoyance.
Definitely.
So I know we've got like a minute or so before I end the show, so I'm sure I will hear from you. I know time flies when you're talking about
the tyrant.
Yeah, thank you. And when you're talking about healing human disconnect, there's so much to say. I don't think I'll ever run out of topics. One last thing I want to say, and you kind of alluded to it, is that when our parents don't deserve the title of parents. What is a parent? I did do a video on this, by the way. What is a parent? A parent is supposed to be nurturing and empathic, and a parent is supposed to reflect things that esteem us. And so when we keep calling the parent a parent, like mom and dad, the injurer who truly injure us, we're really aggrandizing them because they didn't earn the title, and we're hurting ourselves because we're giving credit to somebody who really doesn't deserve it. So this is a kind of an observation and a discussion that I had with a patient today, but more to discuss on that. But think about it. Every time I'll share this with you, and then I'll stop. I remember one time my father was really out of control. He was very demeaning, very devaluing. He had a stroke, so he was totally out of control in the rage department. And he was so mean to me. I turned to him and I said, if you don't stop talking to me like that, don't even bother calling me your daughter. And I think that woke him up. Stroke and all, I think it woke him up. And in my mind, I was thinking, and I won't even bother to call you dad if you keep talking to me like that. So I'll get into it a lot more. I know it's time. So thank you so much, Robert, for calling in.
So much.
And for those of you listening, you can grab a free PDF copy of my book and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and know that there are free consultations available with all my great team members who do mind map therapy, and they're all trained by me in doing the Be the Cause system. And please feel free to reach out. Thank you for listening. Good night, everybody.